Would you believe by the time I was 17 years old, I was pregnant and went to jail all in the summer of my junior year? But here's the kicker. I should have never went to jail, but I'm so glad I did. Come find out why.
Making better grown-ups.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm so glad that you're here. Today's topic is super emotional and super personal to me. I had you laughing last episode, but this episode, I might have you crying along with me. So I'm going to try to hold it together because this is a very deep, deep dive into one of the places in my life that I put in a box. I sealed it with glue. I put a bow on it, and I wanted to pretend it never happened. And for a lot of my life, I got away with that. But my job on this podcast is to open up my heart, open up my soul, tell you my truth in hopes of healing myself, my family, and everyone around me, and inspiring you to do the same. So this episode and the next episode are going to literally probably blow your mind. So hold on to your seats and let's jump right in and go all the way back to 1996 when I was in high school as a sophomore going into my junior year. And I'm going to take you on a little ride of how, well, it wasn't a little ride. It was a very long, bumpy, hellacious ride that I gave myself and my family for several years. But there's so much gold that came out of this. So much healing, so much learning. I had to grow up really fast. I didn't get to be 22 and 23 in college and do all that. No, I had to grow up at the age of 16 years old. I've actually been a mom since I was 16 years old. I've been a mom more than 3/4 of my life. Let's find out the story of how that happened, what happened with the guy, what happened when I went to jail, and why I'm so glad it happened in this order, because God truly was with me. All right, let's go. So let's enter with a dramatic love story. My first love. Now, I would say I had a first love at 15, but he didn't have a car. We only went to concerts escorted by my mother, and he liked country music, so wasn't going to work for me. So I really consider this boy my very, very first love, mainly because, you guys, my best friend Lindsay and I were cheerleading in our sophomore year together, and we were hooked at the hip since we were in 7th grade. We met when we were 12. And as you know from some previous podcast episodes, she is my ride or die. And she had to move away. Her parents decided to move out of the little town we lived in and move to Georgia. And I was like, wait, hold up. You're the only friend I have. What am I going to do without you? And there was a huge void in my life when she left me. She didn't have a choice. I didn't have a choice. That's when I think I was looking for someone to fill the void. So it's kind of weird. We were cheerleading. So we were out at football games, away games. We rode the bus sometimes. We rode with friends. It was a lot more relaxed back in 1996, okay? You didn't have to ride the bus back if you told them you had a ride home. And so we were at an out-of-town game and we were cheering. I remember looking out over, there was like a fence that separated the very popular cheerleaders from the, stands with all the people in it. And I was like, this boy walks by. Now he's tall, dark, has a hat on, looks mysterious. And I see him walk by and he's looking at me. So I'm like, who's that guy? As I'm doing all the things that I'm doing, I was highly distracted by this boy. Now, after the game was over, I'm exiting the game and all of a sudden he's standing right there at the exit. And I'm like, who is that? He comes up to me and he's like, hey, you remember me? And I'm like, do I remember him? He's got full sleeve tattoos. He's got his hat on. He's wearing like really baggy clothes. And I'm like, I don't know. He's like, you just finished dating my brother. And I was like, which one? I had lots of small dating sections in my life. I didn't date people very long because I was like, if you're not my husband, we shouldn't be dating. I broke up with more boys over you're not my husband material, so you got to go. And this boy, if you want to call him a boy, he was 2 years older than me at the time, is telling me that he's back in town. And as he's starting to tell me who he is, I'm starting to remember, oh my God, I know exactly who this is, but he was a stranger to me when he lived here. And where has he been? Where have you been? I asked. He's like, oh, I was away 2 or 3 years living with my parents in a different town. Like I dropped out of high school. I'm like, whoa. I got a truck now. I was like, ooh, he's got a car. This is good. And he's just flirting really hardcore with me. I still don't know to this day. I was trying to rack my brain how he knew I was there, or if he was there on accident and just happened to see me. Because we were on the side where they were the guest football team. We were not the home team. So you'd have to walk all the way around the football field and track to go see, the little crowd with the little group of cheerleaders. So it's still perplexing to me. I guess God will reveal all this to me one day, or maybe he won't. It's a big, gigantic question mark. But that was the moment I came to know Jack. Just the word, just his name triggers me. Not all in bad ways, a lot of good things too. There's just so much attached to his name. There's so many memories. There's so much pain, fear, disappointment, shame. There's so many emotions and feelings attached to him. And it's really not all his fault. I had a part to play in this story, but this is my view. This is the lens in which I see it as a grown woman who's processed for half of my life what happened to me and what I did in this story. And this is my perception now as a semi-healed person. I'm not going to say I'm healed. There's no such thing. Semi-healed person who's looking back and reflecting and trying to pull the light out of the dark. Because even in the darkest places in my life, this was the very beginning, the seed that was planted in my heart that God said, I'm going to show you who I am. And I had no idea what was coming. I just knew there was a cute boy standing in front of me who had a truck, who wanted to give me a ride home. And I was all for that. I was all for that because slowly I started to remember who he was. He was kind of quiet, mysterious, and his brother was really geeky and dorky. So I guess that's why I dated him first, much more approachable. But when he was there in the beginning, guys, he didn't have tattoos. He wasn't tall, baggy clothes, and mysteriously weird. He was just kind of dorky and weird too in a very offset way. Like he was always on his own, doing his own thing. Now that I knew I dated his brother, he's now driving me home from this football game. Now, I didn't live in the city limits. I lived 20 minutes almost out of the city limits. So the fact that anyone wanted to drive me anywhere was a miracle from baby Jesus. So I was like, it's meant to be, right? It's meant to be. All the things are feeling good right now. And besides, we went to church before. We went to church for years with his family. He's familiar-ish, right? He's familiar. I dated his brother. He can't be that much different. I was really naive. I was 16 years old. So it was all about boys and cheerleading, basically. And when Lindsay left, that void needed to be filled. And it's really, really crazy now that I think back on it, because I didn't realize that void was even there until I started taking notes on this story. That she left and I was alone again. And I hadn't been alone since I was 12. So this was a huge place in my life that needed some filling. And what does a 16-year-old do? They fill it with boys. But I want to give you just a little bit of background on who I was. I was very innocent. I was naive. I was in church, y'all know, like 4 or 5 days a week. I was very grounded in my family. I wasn't into drugs or drinking or smoking pot. I didn't do anything in high school. I was scared I would die because my parents told me, if you smoke pot, you're going to die. So I was like, well, I don't want to die. So I just stayed far away from it at all parties, all things, everything that could get me in trouble. I was scared of getting in trouble all the time. I feared my parents in a good way. Like, they're going to come down on me. So the fact that I was about to start dating a bad boy was just, I was blind to it. I didn't see nothing coming. Seriously, I didn't see anything coming. I just saw a genuinely sweet guy who had had a rough couple of years being away, and now he's back. Let's give him a chance. Why not? Why would I judge him before even getting to know him? So while he was gone, he wanted to let me know he kind of fell into the wrong group. What group is that? I'm in a gang. Now, y'all might be saying, he's in a gang? Like, whatever, Leah. That's nuts. No, like legit a gang member. Reformed gang member, as he told me. And I remember studying his hands. He had really, really dark skin and very opposite of me. And I would study his hands, and there's tattoos and there's like dots and symbols all over his fingers. And I would say, what does this one mean? What is that one? He would just tell me, he was sworn to secrecy. He could not tell me what any of that meant. In that moment, I knew there's darkness inside of this guy. Maybe I can fix him. That's an ongoing problem in my life of trying to fix people. All I remembered was he was a Christian. We were in church. He was kind of the outcast of his family, but he wasn't like kicked out. He was always sweet to me, right? Like, I don't understand why anything would be wrong with him. But this new version of him was tattooed, a little rough. He was in trouble quite a bit. He was mysterious, and he seemed like a grown-up to me, kind of. Looking back now, I kind of like, what the hell were you thinking, girl? But God always has a plan. He always has a plan. We don't always do what he asks, but he always pulls out the light out of the darkness. Don't forget that. So my parents were not very fond of this. They were very, very, very suspicious. Who is this? Why is he back? Why did he move away? And why are you dating him? But they knew eventually it was going to happen. I'm going to have a boyfriend. He's going to have a car. And I'm going to leave this house. And I'm going to have a curfew and have to meet it and do all those things. And they put it all into strict, like it was go time. You be home by this time. I'm like, whoa, my curfew used to be 12. Well, it's 10. Okay, that's not fair. But either way, I got to have a boyfriend with a car, so I was good. He was very romantic and gesturing, but he was very controlling. This was all very new to me, this whole dating thing. And I just remember having so many questions. He was so mysterious. What is this? Why are you acting like that? Why are you like, ugh, ugh? He's always like looking over his shoulder, like he was paranoid. And he's like, you don't worry about that. I got this. I got you. I always felt like kind of safe, but like kind of scared shitless. Probably why I hung on so long, because young girls do stupid shit like that. And so while he was away for those few years, he joined this gang. I'm not going to talk about in details what that was. He definitely was into drugs, probably still was, but I didn't know. Again, I didn't know nothing about that kind of stuff. I was very naive. I'm like, if you told me you don't do it, then I believed you. You don't do it. Soon I found out that it was a couple months into dating that he was doing drugs. He was smoking weed, and I got super scared. I was like, okay, we can't do that because my parents said we could die. And he was like, this is stupid. It's just weed. I'm like, no, it's illegal. Well, it was in 1996. We're in 2023. It's legal now. But either way, it was defying the obedience I had to my parents. This was the first time a boy or anyone really was making me choose good or bad, even if it was just weed. It was way heavier to me at that age than it is now. His relationship with his family seemed to have changed, but for the negative. Like, he was like 2 years older than me, so technically he should have been 1 year out of high school, but he was acting like he was like 30. He always had money, and we always had places to go. I always felt like weirdly safe with him, like he would kill somebody for me, but yet scared shitless if I looked at him wrong. Somehow I stayed with him. Somehow, I don't even know. He was rebellious. And I think all 16-year-old girls love some rebellion. If you've heard the last couple of episodes, you heard some of my rebellion. I wasn't an innocent little church girl. I promise you that. But I was definitely not doing what he was doing, which was breaking the law and defying all the odds and tattooing his whole body. And I knew something was off, though, and I was too naive to understand it. I was so innocent at first. He was hand-holding, driving me places, going to all my cheer events and watching me cheer. But started to progressively get worse. There was a lot of controlling, cursing, some pushing, shoving, yelling at me, yelling down at me, and then loving me really good. And it was just really weird. We were not intimate in the beginning at all. And I know this might be TMI for all of y'all, but I feel like you need to know the details of this story in order to just understand how it really felt for me in those moments. So just bear with me. I have to take you back to this story to really show you where I started and my whole family started to see what I got tangled up in, what I chose to be in. So my grandma lived 6 hours away. She lived in Lubbock, Texas, right outside of Lubbock, Texas. And I never brought boys to grandma's house. That's just not something that you do unless you're engaged, right? And I decided I was going to bring him. Why not? My parents were a little like, no, but also like, okay, as long as y'all sleep in separate rooms and you're not canoodling and doing stupid stuff. And I was like, we promise we won't do that. And so we drove his truck, his little green Nissan, single cab. It was like little tiny piece of junk, but either way, it was a car. We drove it the whole 6 hours. We arrived at grandma's and everything was kosher. My family embraced him. My family is always good to see them because usually we only got to see my grandma maybe twice a year, if 3 times if we were lucky. And y'all know how I feel about my grandma. She's legit my favorite friend. I just told him, please don't embarrass me. Please don't curse. Don't smoke weed. Don't smoke cigarettes. Don't do anything dumb. This is my family. These are my people. And he promised. He promised. And we were probably there 5 days or so. And right before it was time to go, he was like, hey, let's get out of the house and go wash the truck. Because there was nothing else in that town. It's just dirt and a car wash. And so I'm like, cool, let's go. So we're washing the truck and I'm standing away from the truck. He's spraying it and washing it off. And slowly out of the corner of my eye, I see this lowrider car drive by really slow, like 10 miles per hour. Because it's like a 1-horse town. There's like 1,000 people living in this town, maybe. And this car is very noticeably different. And all of a sudden, the spray on the hose stopped. Because, it's like, as you're spraying. And I was like, oh, what's going on? And I look at my boyfriend's eyes. And I look at the car. And there was an exchange. It was silent. There was no yelling. There was no cursing. There was no body language. But there was an exchange of energy and symbols with their hands. Like they were saying something with their hands. It was the first time I'd ever seen this. And I was like, what the hell was that? And they drove and they kept driving really slow. And that's when I realized he really was a part of something evil, this gang that he had mentioned. And that whatever he just did with that car, I felt it. I felt fear of him, fear of them, and fear that something bad was going to happen to me. He told me to get in the truck now. So I jump into the truck. I'm like, what was that? He's like, just sit down, put your seatbelt on. He would do that to me sometimes. He would just get like fatherly and like kind of tell me what was going to be. And I think he was trying to protect me because he realized he put me in danger. But I didn't know what kind of danger I was in. So I was in the truck, and later that evening, so we don't have much to do, but I was like shook. I was shook. I was not okay. But I tucked it in and I had to pull it together because my whole family was waiting on me, and I didn't want them to know that some gang symbols were exchanged with a lowrider right, a half a mile from my grandma's house? No, I'm not about to live. I'm not going to show up to grandma's and be like, y'all never going to believe what happened. Some gangs? No. I just pretended like nothing happened. So we all played cards and dominoes and whatever else, to stay busy. All the kids are playing and all the adults are playing. I was kind of misunderstood. I was 16. Was I an adult? Was I a child? Who knows? Let's play Family Feud. That's right in between. So we played games and dominoes and all those kinds of fun stuff. And I don't remember exactly how this happened. But to the best of my memory, it was after dark. It had just gotten dark. And my aunts, uncles, grandma, my parents, my cousins were all there. And a huge, loud crash, bomb, blow up sound happened. And immediately we all kind of went, like we thought that a part of the house blew up. Seriously, that's how loud it felt. We didn't feel it, but we heard it. Jack knew. He knew what happened. I don't know how. I guess because he knew what his hand symbols, whatever that was, whatever he communicated with that car, he knew. He literally jumped from the table and he ran out the back door and flipped on the light and went outside with his dukes up, ready to kill somebody. And there was a huge boulder about the size of my head, maybe a little bit bigger than my head. And it had went through his back windshield and it was sitting in the front floorboard. There was glass everywhere. There was no trace of anyone. Now imagine how my grandma felt. I always try to put myself in her shoes. She welcomed this stranger into her house. She trusted me that I wouldn't bring anyone that would ever bring her danger. And my family was so embarrassed and they were in fear and scared. But his reaction is what shocked me the most. I got love and comfort. It's going to be okay. We're going to figure this out. We're going to call the cops from my grandma and my parents. And from him, I got nothing. Rage, fire in his eyes. He had caused this, but he was blaming whoever did it. He believes, I know, we all know now, that same car knew where we were at that weekend. And that was their rebuttal. I'm going to throw this boulder into the back of this guy's windshield because I know it was them because it was his truck and it was no other car damaged. So he had no explanation for me. He was completely silent. All he did was stand in front of that window, raging, pacing, grunting, like like clenched hands, like white knuckled. There was no pulling him away from that window. And at first I thought, wow, he wants to protect us. Like he wants to make sure that they won't come back and harm us. That's what I really believed. But really what was happening was he wanted to go to war. That's what gang members do. They don't back down. They lean in. I would go to learn about all of this way later. So petrified, embarrassed, ashamed, Mom said, let's pack it up and get out of here. We had to leave the next day. And we drove back with a giant hole in the window. At that point, I really couldn't hide who he was. Like, I might have told my parents a really great story, but now my parents were highly and fully aware that I was a part of something in a relationship with someone who could be very dangerous for me. And I was so embarrassed, you guys. It was hard. I had to apologize to my grandma for years. I thought she would never forgive what I had done, what he had done, and the energy and the danger we had brought to her home. Just freaking insane. But this is the first time I realized he's not who I thought he was. But I was already in love with him. What I thought was in love. And I think I was in love. I truly would do anything for him. I'd put him before my needs at all times. Remember, I was only 16. But the bigger issue was that he convinced me on this trip to lose my virginity. We weren't at home. Change of pace, change of place, change of perspective. I mean, now I look back, I'm like, he definitely changed my perspective. It was on that trip. So much happened in that one trip, which led to one of the most epic life changes that I've ever had in my entire life. And still to this day, it's the number one life change for sure. We left the next day with a gigantic hole in his back window. And it was quiet along a lot of the way. It was a very long 6-hour drive. My family following us, making sure we were safe and no one was going to chase us down or throw more stuff at us or shoot at us or whatever. And the whole ride, I really pondered, am I doing the right thing? How can I ever make this right? This is so weird. Like, what in the hell? I just gave up my innocence and I put my family in danger. Who am I becoming? Like, what? Grandma's house was never like this before. Woo. But you know what? After that moment, when he took my innocence, he made me fear him. That's when all hell broke loose. Over the next few months, like 6 months, things would happen to me that you would not believe. My parents never knew. Somehow I hid all of this from them. This boy, or man-child, whatever you want to call him, had put me in situations where I was maced in the face, zip-tied to his hands, and left in the dirt 20, 30 feet from his truck. Keys thrown out of the truck somewhere in the dirt in the pitch black dark. I was chased by gang members. I remember running the truck into the police station out of fear that someone's going to kill us. I remember running, get in the truck and leave as fast as possible because he had just done something and showed another symbol to somebody of whatever sorts, and we were in danger. And they would chase us in a car chase for over 30 minutes until eventually I was stabbed in the back of the neck. That's a whole other story that we'll get into another day. I realized that I was dating a real true gang member. I just normalized it. Just became normal to me. He continued to take a little bit of my innocence away every month. And the fear went higher and my secrets got deeper. Now it's summer of 1996. I'm officially the summer before my senior year. This is a really big summer. This is when you're going into the last year of your childhood before you enter adulthood. Well, that's what we thought anyway. Not so much. I was 16 years old. My mom was cleaning and noticed that my tampons were not empty. I know, you're like, whoa, hard turn. I know. She was cleaning out the bathroom in the old trailer house and slamming doors and mopping and cleaning. And she's like, comes in there with a box of tampons. She goes, did you have a period this month? And I was like, I don't know. I'd only had my period since I was 15. So I have no idea. And at this point, I really don't know how much I've slept with him. I don't count. I was counting at first, but then I stopped counting because that was weird. And my mom knew when she looked at those tampons that she was supposed to refill them and they were full. And I was like, I have no idea. She's like, Leah, Suzanne, And that the fear, when you get really scared and there's like a warm feeling that goes all the way down to your body, and then you get really cold and you're like, oh shit. She looked at me in the face. She confronted me and she asked me to my face, have you been sleeping with him? Now remember, she just saw what he did at my grandma's. I wasn't going to lie to this lady. She going to hurt me. And she said, I need to know the truth. And I said, yes. She didn't cry or get angry at this point. How many times? I said once. And she knew by the way I answered, I was lying to her. I said, okay, like 5 times maybe. And she's, tell me the truth, Leah. I need to know the truth. And I was like, I don't know. I quit counting. And she started to cry. What have you done? What have you done? I thought there's no way in God's green earth that this innocent church-going girl who's loved God and obeyed, didn't smoke pot, doesn't do the weed, doesn't do drugs, gets home on curfew, is a good girl, could ever get pregnant. No way. Just no way. Because I'm too good. I'm too innocent. That's not going to happen to me. So my mom let me invite 2 of my best friends at the time, not Lindsay, obviously, over to my house for a sleepover. And she told them, when we wake up in the morning, Leah's going to take a pregnancy test. I need you here so I don't kill her. And I was like, oh my God. So we slumber partied in my room, fearing every second that went by. I remember we had the weirdest conversations. They know who they are. Shout out to my slumber party girls. We literally had scary talks about what it could look like, what would really happen. And they were like, nah, it ain't gonna happen. You're good, girl. You're good. It's all good. My mom woke us up really early that morning. There was no sleeping in. My mom comes with the pregnancy test in her hand. God knows where she got it. And she said, go, your first pee on this stick. And I remember going into that trailer house bathroom trembling and just telling God wouldn't let that happen. This is not real life. This is not going to happen. My friends are here. We're all going to laugh about this and we're going to move on. And I'm not going to sleep with him ever again because no, I'm done. I can tell him no. I can tell him no. I peed on the stick. I left it in the bathroom and I went and sat with my friends. My mom comes into the bedroom and she's just like shaking it at me and she's crying. And that moment I knew that my life would never be the same. The pregnancy in itself was so scary for me as a woman, as a girl. My future flashed before my eyes. All my dreams were melting. And I just thought, how could this happen to me? I mean, I knew how, but like how? Because I never wanted to do it. I was told if you want to be with a man, this is what you do. I thought I was just obeying like I did my parents all those years. Just be a good girl, do what you're told. But there was a consequence now for me. A consequence which would turn into my saving grace. I didn't know it at the time, though. My mom definitely didn't know it. My mom was so hurt. She felt so betrayed. And my dad couldn't even look at me. My dad didn't look at me for a really long time. We didn't talk for a really long time. He just passed me by. Make sure I'm in school. Make sure I'm doing good. But this became the biggest struggle of my life. The tug of war of my life between Jack or my parents. Everything was like frozen. And the disappointment was so heavy. I didn't like disappointing people. I still don't. I'm a little better at it now and don't let my feelings get in the way, but my feelings were just, ugh. My mom took me to the Walmart in town and bought at least 6 more tests. She took me over to my aunt's house. She threw them all on the bed and said, pee on all of them. I was like, why? She goes, because I want to make sure. I peed on all of them and all of them were positive. I remember my aunt kneeling down by the bed and holding my hands and she was telling me that God had a plan for me. I was like, how could he let this happen to me? And she said, that's not how it works. We're going to get through this. But my mom did not believe we were going to get through this. She's like, I'm going to kill him. Oh God, it was a lot. I was going to say it was a whole lot, but the war had begun. The war and the spiritual war were well underway for my life. I knew at that moment that there was a calling on my life, that I was being called to something greater, and I could feel the pull to God. I could feel the pull that God was pulling me closer to him for comfort, but all I wanted to do was run to Jack. It was just a cyclical thing that we had going on. Then the real war began on earth. My parents versus his parents. They considered him an adult. At the time, he was 18. And I was 16, so I was a minor. So there was that whole conversation. Consent, minor, had to go through all that. And then it became, do I stay with him and live with him and his parents and become a family, quote unquote? Or do I stay with my parents and live under rigid rules with all, curfews and all that stuff and be a high schooler? It was really hard because I was pregnant now and I was like, I want to be a grown up now. I need to be a grown up and make grown up decisions and do what I want to do and how I want to do it. That's how this is going to roll. But I had no job, had no money. Everything I owned was my father's. He'd given it to me. So there was no way I could just go be grown up. But God was really, really, really pulling on me. I heard him. He was saying, stay. Stay where it's safe. You saw what he's capable of. Stay where it's safe. Fear and panic. I was so torn. I loved him so much. Like, I had a promise ring on my finger. Yes, I was 16. Well, 17 now. I had a promise ring on my finger. I just didn't understand. I didn't understand how this could happen to me. We were seeing less and less of each other because my parents were getting super strict about my time with him. Not like I could get pregnant again or anything, but they were very strict. They wanted me to be safe. My soul was so torn. And a few weeks later, after getting pregnant, I turned 17 and I became, in Texas, an adult. Now, I know in some states you have to be 18 to be an adult. In Texas, it's 17. At 16, you drive a car. You just grow up really fast in Texas, apparently. So it was now middle of June. I'm turning 17. And a few weeks later, the second life-changing event would go down. And this one is a doozy. Of course, you know where this is going to start. In church. I was at church with my family, and I had brought a friend with me. And after church, she had a really, really nice hot rod car. I think it was a Firebird or something like that. I don't know. I'm not really good with names. But it was like a and like sometimes during school, we would skip out on class and go drive around in her muscle car and like get into trouble and do stupid stuff. But she was at church with me. She was actually the daughter of a pastor. So it's only right that she was getting me in all this trouble. And we decided after church to split up from my family. We're going to go to Taco Bell. I've never eaten at Taco Bell ever again. Just want to put that out there. Yuck. But we went there because that's where she wanted to go. As we walk in the door, I see him. And he's in line to order. And his hands are on another girl. I have a promise ring on my finger. I'm newly pregnant. And the ultimate happened. He betrayed me. I've seen him hurt everybody else, but he never really truly physically hurt me, but he hurt me. He broke my heart. I walk through the door. I see him. He turns, he looks at me, and immediately I start gushing tears. I take my promise ring off and I throw it across the Taco Bell and I screamed something at him and we left. And we jumped in her car and I said, go. She's like, where are we going? I was like, I don't know, just go. And she's like, okay. Where do you want to go? So what you don't know about this pastor's daughter, I will not use names. This could get me in some trouble, but you know what? I'm old. It's okay. She taught me how to shoplift. Like, she was a pro at taking things that she wanted. And I'd done it before, minor, tiny little things, like not a big deal. It is a big deal, but in my mind, it wasn't a big deal. Like a necklace or a shirt or whatever. Go to Walmart and grab something. It's stupid. I wish I could take those days back, honestly. I feel like maybe I planted some roots for my daughter and my other children, and I don't want those roots in my life. But either way, being a stupid kid that I was, I followed whatever she wanted to do. I was so emotional. I was so hurt, and I was pregnant. So the emotions were high. She said, you want to go shopping? I said, yes, that's fine. She's like, ooh, I've got the perfect place. It's the biggest mall. It's not the local mall. It's the big one. I'm like, okay, whatever. We go to the mall. We grab some lunch there, and we go into this really nice department store. And she walks me around the store. And she's like, so what'd you do? Did you go from this to that and this to that? And she showed me how to shoplift at a high level. And I was like, oh my God. I was really nervous. First of all, you got to remember, I just came off of my boyfriend with another girl and found out I was pregnant like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Okay? It couldn't get any worse. Or could it? We went around the store, we were gathering all the things and making piles on our arm of what we were going to take. And I remember this really specific moment. I feel like God sends people to step in, to warn you, to give you an option out. And this lady at the jewelry counter, I'm just walking by grazing and looking at stuff, and I have a pile full of clothes and stuff in my arms. And she said, what are you looking for? And I've said, I'm just looking. I don't know. She's like, is there anything you'd like to pull out of the case and look at? And I was like, no, I'm just looking. So I'm looking at the cheap jewelry and like on the, the rack. And she's like, would you like me to hold your stuff for you? And I literally thought about it. I went, this is your chance to give it away and walk out safe. I literally thought about it. And I know she knows I thought about it. That's why she asked me. I mean, what jewelry counter girl asks you to hold your clothes? Nobody. And I told her, thank you. I'm about to check out, but thank you. It's no big deal. And I just slowly walked away. But as I walked away, I felt it. I felt fear just run down my spine. So much fear in my life at that point. So we went to the very, very top level of the mall in this department store. And she shows me how to swipe the bag, how to get the stuff in the bag. And literally we meet back up at the top of the escalator. I remember the feeling of, it's over. We got away with it. Someone would have caught us by now. And we're going down the escalator. I'm in front. She's right behind me. And once you get down the escalator, there's like a couple of racks of clothes. And then there's the door that leads outside. And outside that door was the car. The sports car, the Firebird or whatever it's called. We just had to get through that door. And then we could go home. And I could go figure out my shit. My broken heart shit. And by the time we got down to the bottom level, there was a man in a uniform. I thought he was a cop, but he was just a security guy. And he turns the corner and he stands in front of the escalator. He looks at both of us and he says, come with me. I looked at her and she goes, don't worry, it's nothing. And I was like, oh my God. He pulls us into a small room and shuts the door and has us sit on a couch. It's a 2-seated couch. It's old, so the cushion kind of moves around. I could feel it, like when you sit down, it kind of moves. And she was a bigger girl. And she sits there and the whole couch kind of shifted. So I'm kind of sitting up. And I could feel it. It's such a weird detail, but you'll understand why here in just a minute. But this security guard sat across from us, pulled up to a table at a desk, and was like, did y'all pay for that? Yeah, we paid for it. Where's your receipts? We don't have receipts. We're just lying out our butt. And then I finally just said, I didn't pay for it. And she looked at me like I was crazy. But I was like, dude, I'm already knee deep in a lot of crap right now. The last thing I want is they say I'm a liar. Because that's one thing I really wasn't. I wasn't a liar. Might have been a thief, but I wasn't a liar. So because she lied and never gave up her innocence, she was the one first to check her bag. At this point, she's telling me under whispers, they're just going to give us a fine and kick us out and we'll never be able to come back. He's adding up with the calculator all the things that she's stolen. I had my purse sitting in my lap, you guys. This is so screwed up. I had my purse sitting in my lap because I had jewelry and little tiny things inside of it. And as he's adding up her total, he looks at her and he says, you're a couple $100 away from a felony. And I was like, oh my God, I probably have a felony. I am secretively, very quiet, through my tears and my crying, shoving jewelry and accessories in the back of the couch because it was lifted up because I was sitting up high because she was making the couch lopsided. So I was just shoving it underneath me quietly. He went to count my items out of my bag. I was $50, less than $50 shy of a felony. I would have had a felony on my record for the rest of my life because this girl convinced me to do this one more time with her in a place I did not know on the worst day of my life after the worst day before that a few weeks ago. And here I am, a criminal. Literally, this was one of the lowest points of my life. I was like, God, where are you? I think he was more like saying, where are you, girl? Where are you? What are you doing? Look at these people you surrounded yourself with. You're not doing very good. I just went from like such a good girl to now this terrible version of myself. And a lot of it, you guys, I think was influence. I didn't like say one day, I'm going to be a shoplifter. I want to get pregnant and be a teen mom statistic. I started hanging out with the wrong people. And I'm so glad I did. Let me tell you why. that day that we were pulled into that office with that security guard, I remember him saying, "Let me see your license." And she handed it over and he said, "Oh, you're 16. He said, "Hand over my license." And he said, "Oh, you're 17. You're an adult." "I am?" And he was like, "Yep, you're an adult." He's like, "So, other girl, let's call your parents." They called her parents and they had to come to the mall and they were fined. They took her picture, they put it on the wall, and she got to go home with a slap on the wrist. And I, on the other hand, was 17 by a few weeks, carrying a child, and I went to jail. The big one. Not some local jail where everyone's nice and tells you it's all going to be okay. Hell no. I went to Tarrant County Jail. Scary, cold, yelling, screaming. Everyone looked scary. It was a weekend. So it's Sunday, right? So weekends are crazy in a jail. If you've never been into jail or tried to get someone out of jail on a weekend, that's a whole other ball game. I remember the man the cop who was like, I'm gonna escort you to the car. Literally, you guys, you don't understand. The escalator was 15 feet from the door. So the little place they put us in, I said, "Do you have to handcuff me? This is really, really embarrassing. I will walk. I'll do anything you want. Just don't put the handcuffs on me." And he looked at me and he said, "I have to." I said, I promise I will be good." He's like, "It's not about that. I want you to feel it. Because I don't believe you'll ever do this again." I was crying so hard I couldn't wipe my own tears because my hands were handcuffed behind my back. And they were so tight that I had like marks on my wrist by the time I got there because I was struggling. I was panicking. I probably told half of my life story to that man, that cop driving me to the Tarrant County Jail. Like, he walked me through every single step that was going to happen to me once I got there. And I just think about like what kind of cop I could have got. But he was just so kind, and he was like, "Listen, just listen. I'm gonna walk you through everything." And even when I try to interrupt him, he'd say, "Just listen." Because he knew I was scared out of my mind. But he walked me through everything. "You're gonna go through this, you're gonna do that, they're gonna ask you for this, you're gonna do that. Just do what they say. Do not speak. And call someone once you get there. Find the phones. Call your parents and have them come get you." I was like, hell no. I am not calling my parents. And somewhere in my naive little tiny brain, I thought, they'll never find out about this. I'm going to keep this a secret. It was really, really rough. They did my intake, my fingerprints, my photo. Yes, the classic photo. And I thought to myself, if I just stay quiet, I get to that phone, I'm going to get out of here in a matter of like an hour. I never wanted to do this again. And what's really funny when I look back and I remember, every station I went to for all those things that I had to do in order to be put in the holding cell, every single person saw my eyes. They saw the innocence in me. And they would all say, "It's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. You're going to get out of here really quickly." It's like they knew I wasn't supposed to be there. I didn't belong there. But why was I there? If I didn't belong there, how did I get here? How did my life change so dramatically in a month? It was really hard to fathom. But guess what? This was the one place and the one time in my life I was alone. For the first time, I was alone. And scared out of my mind. Sitting next to people in the holding cell, y'all. Oh, okay. First of all, when I got into the holding cell, I was like looking at all the women around me. We had prostitutes. We have women who looked kind of like drugs or drunk. I'm not sure. We had outspoken women who'd been there many times and were like conducting all the conversations. And I just sat against the wall with my head down and tears just falling from my eyes because I don't want to look in the eyes of any of these people. I don't want to like see my weakness because I've watched those movies on TV. You don't want to be weak, even though I was in a holding cell. In my mind, it was bars and jail. That was a very stiff, hard, deep door that was like 4 inches deep with a tiny window. I was not getting out of there. I remember I remember there was a lady sitting next to me and she's like, girl, what'd you do? And I was like, I was afraid to say it because I was so ashamed of myself. And I was like, I got caught shoplifting. And she's like, ah, she started laughing. And I was like, what? And they all were like, girl, you're fine. Girl, all of them, girl, you'll be out of here tonight. And I was like, will I? They're like, yes, it's a misdemeanor, right? Did you have a felony or a misdemeanor? I was like, a misdemeanor. They're like, you're good. It's all good. You're going to get out of here. And then she looked at me and she said, I stabbed my husband. I was tired of him hitting me. And then all of a sudden, my gigantic, massive, life-changing moment got a little bit smaller because I was like, she's not leaving tonight. She's not leaving. Then they would let you use the phone, right? So the ladies were like, oh, next time the phone comes up, you try to get in line for the phone. Now, back in those days, we memorized all the phone numbers, y'all, because we didn't have all the cell phones and stuff. So I knew 2 numbers. I knew my mom and I knew Jack. Guess which one I called? Jack, the guy who just apparently cheated on me and got me pregnant and ruined my life. He's going to save me. He's going to redeem the situation and he's going to save me because guess what? He's been in jail a lot. He's a pro with this. He's going to know who to call, how to get me, how to pay for it and get me out. And then my parents will they're never going to know. They're never going to know. I called him the first time. He answered. It was a collect call. So it said where it was from, the Tarrant County Jail. And he was like, what are you doing? And I was like, you have to help me. You have to help me. I'm in trouble. He was like, obviously. Why are you in jail? I was like, I was with Jen after I saw you. And he was like, yeah, when he threw something at me. I was like, you were with another girl. He's like, she's my friend. I said, your hands were on her. I said, it doesn't matter. I just need out of here. How does this work? He's like, you got to make bail. And my bail was like, I don't know, a couple $1,000 or something. I said, can you do that for me? He's like, I don't have money. I said, can your parents do something for me? He's like, girl, no, we can't help you. I was like, I'm carrying your child. And he was like, you're gonna have to call your parents. And he hung up on me. And once you hang up, they make you leave and go back to the holding cell until it's your turn to call again. I went back again and I called him again. And this time he answered. He's like, what? He was like super annoyed with me. I was like, babe, you have to help me out of here. I can't call my parents. He said, I already called them. I was like, you did what? He's like, they'll be on their way. I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe you just did this. You betrayed me on such a high level. At that moment, I wasn't scared of jail. I was scared of my mom and dad coming. It's one thing to have handcuffs and sit next to criminals and be scared alone, but knowing who's coming for you, like, what am I going to say? What are they going to say? I remember the ladies telling me, if you don't get out of here before before midnight, if you don't get out of here before midnight, they're going to put you in a cell and you will have to change clothes. And I was like, oh, no, I'm not putting on a uniform. No. They're like, it's just all about timing. Even if your parents get here, there's processes. Can't promise that you won't be wearing a uniform and sleeping on a cot. And I was like, oh my God, I can't do this. Sheer fear, y'all. So much fear in my life at that time. And then they called me at 11:50. I watched the clock because that was the only thing in the room that I cared about was that damn clock. And it said 11:50 and they called my name. And by the time I got out the front doors, my parents were standing out there and they released me to go out. My dad didn't hug me right away. My mom did. She embraced me. She was crying. They were really disappointed that I called Jack. They were really disappointed in a lot of things in me. I'm surprised they came. I'm not surprised because they're awesome, but I'm surprised they could keep forgiving me that many times. You know, as a parent now, I get it. Like, you just do crazy things for your kids. You forgive them endlessly because you love them endlessly. And it's the first loves of your life, right? They teach you what it looks like. And in that moment, I thought I was going to get reamed. I was like, they're going to ream me. They're going to just destroy me. And they loved me and they sat me in the back of the car. And I remember I sat in the middle seat and I could see my dad's eyes in the rearview mirror and he never looked at me. And my mom said nothing. It was silent for almost an hour. They said, go take a shower and go to bed. And I thought, oh my God, I got away with it. I got away with it. They're going to forgive me and we're going to wake up. It's going to be okay. Wrong. The morning after sucked. It sucked almost as bad as going to jail. To explain myself, to tell them about Jack, to tell them it's not the first time I've done this, to tell them most of the story. I mean, my mom's going to hear this now and be like, I did not know all that. But that's the point of this. This is a true story. I have to tell you the truth. I now realize that after talking to my parents, I had a criminal record and that this would affect me getting scholarships and going to college and eventually getting a job. I had never even thought that far. Not only did I screw up by getting pregnant, but now I have a criminal record. Whatever will I do? I was so ashamed and I betrayed my family. I was mortified. I was pregnant. I was messed up. But even after that, they forgave me the pregnancy, the jail time. And then I did what any 16-year-old would do. I snuck away from school in the middle of the day to try to get all my stuff out of their house and secretly move out and move in with Jack. Do you see the pull that just kept pulling me back? You know, like when you get in the ocean and it just keeps pulling you out further and further. That's what Jack felt like to me. It's almost like I couldn't help myself. I just couldn't choose between my family and him. I just couldn't make a hard decision. I felt like I was going to lose the other one if I chose. Because that's what's going to happen. There will never be harmony between our families. So I left in the middle of the day. And I arrived to my house and there was someone, well, I actually got into the house and then someone came, y'all, this is so screwed up. My dad didn't trust me. Obviously, he had people watching the house and they called him and said, your daughter's here and she's unloading everything into the truck. Looks like she's moving out. Well, Dad had him park his truck in front of the driveway and block me until he got there, only to let me know, I'm so sorry. You can't take that stuff. It's mine. And I was like, it's mine? He's like, no, I gave that to you. I bought that for you. All of that is mine. Jack's like, take it then, and unloaded all of it. He said, we'll buy her all new stuff. He said, you can have your pillow, your purse, your school bag, and the clothes you have on. And my dad asked me, Leah, is it worth it? And I said, yes. And I took my stuff, very little that I had, and I got in that truck and I drove away to go live with him in what I thought would be our family. And you know, I was right. If I chose Jack, I lost my family. If I chose my family, I lost Jack. But I had never not lost my family. So I tested the waters and I left. It would be the beginning of my senior year. His mom had to take me to buy all new clothes, shoes, essentials. And remember, I'm growing because I'm pregnant. So I'm not buying just regular clothes. I'm having to buy clothes I can grow into. And now I have to go face all of my peers and let them know I'm pregnant. What's really, 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 really crazy, you guys, is there were over 30-something girls in our high school that were pregnant my senior year. It was such a big deal. The newspaper ran stories on it. They had people coming to our school and interviewing us. They started a parenting class. So while I felt like I was the only person in the world that anything had happened to, it was a wild year where they were like, what's in the water? I think the title of the article was, what's in the water? I still remember a lot of those girls that I had parenting class with. They actually created a class. Isn't that wild? It's like, maybe I should have created a class that would teach me not to do any of this instead of what to do after. That would have been helpful. But it's not their problem. It's not their job to raise me. It's weird times, you guys. But eventually, I had to move back home. The fear and the loneliness without my parents was absolutely devastating to me. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it anymore. So I called them and they said, absolutely, you can come home. And I did. And eventually, they forgave me. I could feel the darkness in his house. I could feel it when I slept. I slept alone on the bottom of a bunk bed. And I remember that pillow was my only thing that felt like home. It smelled like home. It felt like home. And still to this day, y'all are going to think I'm crazy. I still sleep with the same pillow. And yes, it's old. And yes, it's probably gross. But I still sleep with it because it's just safety to me. It's familiar. when I was in the darkest places of my life, it's what made me feel close. After moving back in with my parents and continuing my senior year, my dad was like, we have to get a lawyer. And I'm like, why? He's like, we have to get a lawyer so we can talk about just like what needs to go down with this. You can't just pay a fee and walk away. There's other things that happen. So now he takes me to the lawyer's office, and it's in downtown Fort Worth. We drove a really long ways, and my dad's paying for all this. Remember, even though I betrayed him, I don't even know how many times I betrayed my parents or disappointed them in a high level. But the big rule is you cannot hang out with anyone who has a record, Leah. Do you understand? And I was like, wait, come again? He said, you cannot hang out with anyone who's ever been in trouble with the law. I like, in what capacity? He's like, at all. I'm like got a ticket, got pulled over, or like went to jail, or he's like, everything but the ticket. Immediately, I remembered that my boyfriend, Jack, has multiple records, felonies, and has been in jail multiple times. I was pregnant with his baby, and I couldn't even see him. And if I ever saw him, my lawyer said, you will go back to jail, no bail. You will not be able to get out. I was like, but I'm carrying his child. He's the father of my baby. And he said, well, you made that choice. It felt like the worst punishment in the entire world, but yet I felt so relieved I didn't have to choose. It's like God made the choice for me. So I felt really comforted in that, but also like, what the hell am I going to do? Be a single mom the rest of my life? It was really, really, really devastating. The choice was made for me. Come to find out, Jack would get in more trouble. We did try to see each other a few times. That did not work out well. My mom had people watching me in town, looking for his truck, looking for my car. And several times the cops would pull up on me and say, you're not supposed to be talking to him, and split us up and send me home and follow me home. Because my mom was cool like that. Do anything to protect me. So he eventually went back to jail, obviously. And I remember journaling every single day to him. Never gave him the journal. He never saw any of them. And he would write me letters from jail. And I would just write to him what it was like to be pregnant. I'm glad I did, because now I have a really detailed journal of my life during one of the hardest seasons of my life as a child. But I would not see him again. How could I see him again? Then it was time for my dad to talk to me about getting my stuff expunged. So if you don't want to know what an expungement is, it's a fancy word for get it taken off of your record if you've been really good since. Now, this was really important because I was going to go to college and eventually get a job as a teacher. And my dad knew in the future, if you're a teacher, you cannot have a criminal record. You have to get this off your record. So it's like way later. I don't want to tell you when it was because I don't want to lie, but it's like 1 or 2 years later. I don't really remember. And I had, gone way past the point of, being in love with Jack and going through all of this stuff. And my dad's like, we just got to go do it. It's going to cost a lot of money and take some time. That's why we got to start now, so that when you start your teaching career, you don't have to worry about this. My dad's always saving my butt. And we get to the expungement office and we're talking to the lawyer. And before I could get too far, wait for it, he said, so tell me, how did it go down? I don't know the whole story. And I told him the whole story and how we're going down the escalator and how the security guard was at the bottom of the escalator and put us in this room. And then the cop showed up and he handcuffed me and the other girl went home. And he leaned back in his chair. Remember, he leaned back. He goes, and squinted his eyes. And I was like, what? He said, so you didn't make it out the door to the outside world? I was like, no. He's like, you should have never been arrested. Hold up. What? Dad kind of a sigh, because my dad knows Jesus. So my dad's like, oh, isn't that ironic? Now, here's what we need to learn from this lesson of this long, drawn out saga, which only like 2 years of my life, maybe 3, this saga of just pure heartbreak and disappointment to everybody, that God was moving in my life the whole time. He had a master plan the whole time. And I felt it. I felt tugged and I felt pulled in directions, but I was too immature to understand what it meant until way later. Even when the expungement lawyer told me that, I was more like, I'm an idiot. Or, oh, why didn't somebody know that? Why didn't the cop ask? Like, why? But way later, as we heal and we grow up and we start to learn more about ourselves and our relationship with God, and we ponder on hardships and we try to dissect them to figure out why this all happened to me and what could come out of this, is that Jack, will become more and more toxic and more dangerous over the years. And by me having a criminal record, supposedly, he was not able to see me, which kept me away from him my entire pregnancy, which meant I was a single mom from the get-go, which meant I was training myself up to do this alone, because he would then go to jail where I couldn't see him anyways, and further and further and further away we would go, and closer to God I would go. And that just separated us and parted us apart so deeply that I fell out of love with him and I fell in love with my daughter. I've never been so glad to be wrong. I'm so glad they got it completely wrong. If I could go back and reverse this story and retell it in a way where I didn't go to jail, I would not do it. Because it literally saved my life. It saved my daughter's life. And although things aren't peachy keen, sometimes life isn't peachy keen. She's better for not knowing him. And we'll get into the story way later in another time, to where he finally reached out 18 years later. But for now, I'm just going to leave it as trust the process. Understand that there are powers working for you. And even if it feels like the darkest, deepest hole you've ever been in, just know there's always light somewhere. Look for the light. Trust the process. Be better and do better. And by goodness, tell the people who keep forgiving you and love you, thank you. Again and again and again and again. And then you pay it forward and you do it for your children again and again and again and again. So that's my story of how I went to jail and I wasn't supposed to, and it saved my whole life. I can't wait to share with you in part 2 of this series in a few days. So thanks for joining me for this long story. See you next time. I just want to thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end of this story. It means so much to me that you gather with me every week to go and deep dive into my memories and pull out these stories. I can't wait to do the same with you. Next week is going to be part 2 of this series, Teen Mom Statistic. And it's going to be where I tell you a little bit of an even harder story. If you can believe that, it gets even harder, of how I went from being a parent to becoming a mom when my daughter was 3 years old and almost lost her life in my arms. I know it sounds dramatic, because it is. I can't wait to chat with you guys next week. Stay tuned, rate, review, like, all the things. You know what to do. And if you feel like you're in the giving spirit, we always need your help. Easily by going to patreon.com/makingbettergrownups, where you can subscribe to $5 a month, $10 a month, $10,000 a month, anything to help us keep this podcast on the air and alive for you. We appreciate everything that you do for us. Until then, we'll see you next week, where we will hopefully continue this conversation.
Making better grow up. Grow up, people. That's the wrap.